Thank you all for coming tonight to the UI Explorers lecture series. Tonight's lecture will be by Dr. Nancy Budd, professor in the Department of Geoscience. Along with her position here at the university, she is also a research assistant at the National Museum of Natural History at the Smithsonian Institution. Her research focuses on coral paleontology with regards to coral evolution and paleoecology, where her work takes her to many exciting research localities such as the Dominican Republic. And tonight she will be talking about one of her current research topics, coral reef conservation, in the talk entitled Sustaining the Biodiversity of Coral Reefs, Why Evolution Matters. So thank you for speaking tonight.
Our understanding of evolution of corals has changed radically in recent years. And these changes have important implications for marine conservation, specifically the protection of coral reefs, which are currently endangered. Some of the new developments that have been occurring are the result of analyses of molecular data, and they have caused those of us that work in the fossil record to go back to our data and rethink it. Our data, of course, is morphologic data, in other words, the form and structure of organisms. And this slide gives an example of that. Here on the left, you can see brain corals, first Atlantic Diploria on top, and Pacific Platygyra on the bottom, and you can see that they have similar valley shapes, which have caused systematists in the past to think that they're very closely related. However, molecular data suggests that they're not related at all. And that has prompted me and some of my colleagues to go and look more closely at these individual partitions that make up the valleys. And by looking more closely at these partitions, you can see that they're quite different in terms of their shapes and sizes and so on. The bumps that occur across them are quite different in Atlantic Diploria than Pacific Platygyra. Okay, so the work that I'm going to present today, I have many colleagues who've worked together with me on this project. First, with regard to morphologic data, I've been working with Jarek Stolarski at the Polish Academy of Science. With regard to molecular data and analyses, Hiro Fukami and Nancy Knowlton have collected the molecular data and analyzed them for me, and Nate Smith at the University of Chicago, who many of you may know, has been helping me with the comparisons between morphological data and molecular data. John Pandolfi has been helping with field work and also with the implications for marine conservation. The talk today has three parts. First, I'll present a general overview of coral biology. Then I'll talk about the evolution of higher taxonomic levels, families, genera, and so on. And then I'll wrap up with the evolution of species, and I'll talk about how our new results with regard to the evolution of higher taxonomic levels and the evolution of species are important for marine conservation towards the end. So just as an introduction, tropical coral reefs are the most diverse of all marine habitats, with estimates of species numbers ranging from 1 to 9 million. Some estimate that as many as a third of all marine species live on coral reefs, and they've been commonly referred to as the tropical rainforests of the sea. Coral reefs occur across the globe in tropical regions. They're restricted to shallow locations with limited sedimentation, low nutrients, and good circulation, and all these red dots on the map indicate places where coral reefs are recorded. They are built by stony corals or reef corals, or sometimes they're referred to as scleractinian corals. These are the individuals consist of these cylindrical shaped structures with the central mouth surrounded by tentacles, and those that build reefs tend to be colonial. 99% of them are colonial and live in colonies such as this one. The members of the colonies are functionally and morphologically identical. However, I should point out that these organisms are highly phenotypically plastic. In other words, they change their morphology in response to the environment. And so their morphology is highly variable as well. In terms of feeding, corals capture zooplankton at night using tentacles, and that's shown over here on the left. All these white blobs are nematocysts, which they use to paralyze prey with, and then they bring the prey into the central mouth. The corals tend to be retracted during the day. Here's a retracted one over here. They harbor lots of different types of symbionts, and the most famous of all their symbionts are dinoflagellate algae that are referred to as zooxanthellae. The zooxanthellae live in the endodermal tissue, shown here. These are the yellow blobs shown in that diagram of the tentacle. Essentially, the zooxanthellae photosynthesize, and as a result of their photosynthesis, they remove waste from the coral, and the coral is thereby able to calcify much more rapidly and build huge skeletons. And next slide shows a huge skeleton that corals build. Essentially, the skeletons form the framework of reefs, and they're well preserved in the fossil record, so we have a nice long evolutionary history of corals. As this slide shows, the bulk of a coral colony is skeleton. The soft tissue is only a thin veneer on the surface. In terms of reproduction, corals are also very, very simple. Many are hermaphroditic. In other words, they produce both sperm and eggs, and they exhibit two types of reproductive strategies: broadcasting, in which the gametes, both sperms and eggs, are released into the water column, and there's external fertilization. They also engage, some of them do, in brooding, in which the eggs are retained within the coelenteron, in other words, in the central body cavity. Many, as it says at the bottom of the slide, many broadcasting species release egg and sperm that are bundled together, as shown above, and engage in mass spawning events. Because of the mass spawning events, the possibility for hybridization exists, but the extent to which hybridization exists is still unclear. And I'll talk lots more about hybridization as we move through the lecture. Corals have a free-swimming larval stage in which they disperse. And as it says here, in some species, larvae settle near their parents. In others, they disperse more than hundreds of kilometers. As a result of this wide dispersal, endemism is rare, and dispersal essentially enhances gene flow and connectivity amongst populations. Okay. The ongoing demise of coral reefs has been very much in the news. Here are a number of different journals showing corals in trouble. As it says in this slide, estimates assembled through experts' opinions of 372 coral reef scientists and managers from 96 countries are that the world has effectively lost 19% of the original area of coral reefs already. 15% are seriously threatened with loss within the next 10 to 20 years, and 20% are under threat of loss in the next 20 to 40 years. Some of my colleagues think that's not too bad, because that means that there 40% will be left to protect. Okay. The main threats to corals include things like global warming, ocean acidification, pollution, both nutrients and other types of pollutants, and overfishing. One thing that we've seen more commonly throughout the globe is coral bleaching. This is a breakdown of symbiosis and the losses of the zooxanthellae, and it results in white-colored colonies. These colonies are actually still alive, but they need to regain their zooxanthellae after a few days, or else they'll die. As it says here at the bottom, the link between increased greenhouse gases, climate change, and regional scale bleaching of corals, considered dubious by many reef researchers only 10 to 20 years ago, is now incontrovertible. So global warming is taking its toll. Also important are things like overfishing, where essentially we've lost a lot of the top levels of the food web. And once we start losing top levels of the food web, coral reefs start to collapse. The first stage they go through is fish-dominated herbivory, then echinoid-dominated herbivory, until finally they're completely collapsed and you just have a macroalgal bloom. Okay, so how can evolution contribute to conservation measures to protect corals? So like I said, the second part of this talk is about the evolution of higher taxa, families, genera, and so on. And the last part will be about the evolution of species. So this is the beginning of the middle part. Corals belong, in terms of their systematics, to the phylum Cnidaria class, and within the phylum Cnidaria, the class Anthozoa, and within the class Anthozoa, the order Scleractinia. The phylum Cnidaria is characterized by radial symmetry, central mouth surrounded by tentacles, two different body forms. There's a polyp body form and a medusa body form. But more important, they only have two germ cell layers, and so they're very, very simple organisms. And they also all have nematocyst along their tentacles. There are three classes. The class Anthozoa is distinguished as being exclusively marine polypoid cnidarians, including sea anemones, scleractinian corals, tube anemones, sea pins, sea fans, and so on. There are 14 orders. 6 are hexacorals, in other words, the septa arranges in cycles of 6, and 8 are octocorals, in other words, their septa or mesenteries are arranged in cycles of 8.